You are listening to the IoT For All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All Podcast, the number one publication and resource for the Internet of Things. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon. If you are watching this video on YouTube, we'd really appreciate it if you'd give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Also, if you are listening to this on a podcast directory, please feel free to subscribe so you get the latest episodes as soon as they are out. All right, on today's episode, we have Matt Barber, the CEO of Vutility. They are a leading provider of high-resolution energy monitoring. They enable businesses across industries to optimize their energy consumption and improve operational efficiencies. Matt is a fantastic guest. We talk a lot about the data side of IoT. We talk about causes of stale data, what stale data means, issue with data collection in use cases associated with the environment and energy. We talk about how to better capture timely, relevant, and accurate data, how to make or the making of unique product hardware that has lots of different patents associated with it, different technical implementations, different things that are, or I guess the challenges that are associated with that, and kind of how to approach it, how to approach the buy versus build conversation, talk about scalability, things along those lines. But it's a fantastic conversation that I think you'll get a lot of value out of. But before we get into the episode, any of you out there are looking to enter the fast-growing and profitable IoT market, but don't know where to start? Check out our sponsor, Leverage. Leverage's IoT solutions development platform provides everything you need to create turnkey IoT products that you can white label and resell under your own brand. To learn more, go to iotchangeseverything.com. That's iotchangeseverything.com. And without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT For All Podcast. Welcome, Matt, to the IoT For All Podcast. Thanks for being here this week.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Ryan. Appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this conversation. Let's start off with a quick introduction about yourself, background, experience, anything that could be relevant for our audience.
Yeah, so my name is Matt Barber. I'm the CEO of Vutility. I've been here for about 5 years now. I have a varied background in consulting, finance, and then strategy, really. And I joined Vutility as the Chief Operating Officer 5 years ago. I've been the CEO for about 2 years. So I've been intimately involved in creating the product and driving it to scale, and then creating the market around it.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit more about the company itself, kind of the overall focus, goal, role you all play in IoT, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So right now, Vutility we are a B2B company, so we don't do any residential products. It's all commercial. What we realized from our early days is that granular data, specifically right now, energy behind the meter. So if you think about a building that has a meter, there's no data what's happening behind that meter, and that's where we focus with our proprietary hardware, software solutions to deliver and capture that relevant data behind the meter and get it out timely, relevant, accurate, and at low costs. And so that gives us a scalable advantage. So
Fantastic. Yeah, let's dive into that here in a second, but I wanted to ask if you could maybe dive in a little bit more to kind of the use cases and applications that you all are involved with. It usually helps kind of bring everything full circle from what it is that you all do to the general applications and problems you solve in the industry you focus on.
yeah, so the cool thing about our product is everybody needs this granular data, and they use it for different purposes. So I can show you, if you want me to, I can show you a piece of our product right now.
Okay.
So look at this device. This is called the
Yep.
HotDrop. So what this device does is you can put it on any wire in the panel, and similar to the physics of how you charge your phone inductively, this inductively charges off the magnetic flux of the wire. So it harvests energy. There's no batteries and there's no plugs to it. So in essence, any critical asset in a building, you can go snap this on, scan it, and it begins to measure and monitor in real time and backhaul the data out to understand with granularity any machines that are behind the meter. So a good if you think about an industrial environment where there's pumps, there's air conditioners, there's all these critical assets, you can put one of these meters on every one of those and understand in real time, is it on or off?
Right.
How much energy is it consuming? Is it going to fail? So predictive failure and maintenance. So it's a level of granularity of critical assets that no one's been able to do because it's so cost prohibitive and so time consuming to back all that data out.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's kind of a great overview. It's kind of like a fitness tracker
Exactly. Yep.
for the space. So
Yeah.
cool. So I wanted to ask you though, when it comes to the collection of data in
Mhm.
environmental and energy use cases, what are the general issues with data collection and potentially the causes, and maybe they kind of connect together, the causes of more like stale data in general? So kind of higher level picturing it just to kind of set the tone a little bit more for our audience who may not be as familiar with the space as others would be.
Yeah, so that's a really broad question. So I'll try to talk a little bit about the collection of the data and the value of collecting it, and how difficult it actually is to collect.
Hmm.
So typically, first of all, one of the hard things about installing data and collecting data at a panel is a panel is a steel box, right? Which creates a Faraday cage. So typically, it's hard to wirelessly pull that data out and broadcast it out with any kind of distance. We've chosen a protocol called LoRaWAN, and you're probably familiar with it. LoRaWAN can go miles outside. Inside a building, we can get thousands of feet. So what that allows us to do, first of all, is have hundreds of these devices in a building with very high certainty that the data is going to be able to backhaul to the gateway. The next issue with data that we see cropping up with IoT is security of data, right? And so one of the things that, because our partners are energy companies, there's a certain standard to backhauling that data that was important for us to have. So we have our own layer of encryption on the data so that if there's a man in the middle or someone's trying to intercept that data, it's basically garbled junk that comes to them and it's decrypted in our cloud. One of the things, the device is basically an edge computer. So one of the things that we also focused on is I spoke at an edge computing and IoT conference, and I don't know that, so stale data is a problem, but one of the bigger problems that I think industrials are seeing is the massive amounts of data that are coming from the edge to the cloud, right? I read that by next year, it's like 1.3 gigs a second are being created from edge devices in the Fortune 100 companies. And so having too much data that's not relevant and having
Right.
pooled unstructured is actually a really big problem. So one of the things that we focus on our devices is actually limiting the data points that we're bringing back and sending back only the most salient or relevant data points to the customer. So I
And
don't know.
is that a decision that you all kind of have expertise and focus in, and or is that something that you're discussing with the customer and helping them kind of evaluate what is truly relevant and what maybe not, maybe more
Yeah,
noise?
yeah, that's a good question. Typically, the use cases for the energy data, it's pretty static. Like they all want, amperage, amp hours, but we can backhaul other data. We can backhaul temperature. We can backhaul different data about the device. But at least for these use cases, we know we can target in, and rather than try to pull all the data back, use the energy on the device and eat up, cloud storage, we've targeted in and we know the data that we want to bring back off of our own proprietary devices, right?
Hmm.
But it's a moving target, as customers ask for different use cases and we start to understand more of
Right.
what they're doing with the data, we may adjust the strategy. But as of right now, it's kind of like why everybody loves the Apple products. It's so simple to install, to use, right?
Hmm.
Our installation process is simple. The data comes back simple. Our APIs are simple, and we think creating simplicity for the customer, even around the kind of data that's coming back, is our job. At Utility.
Yeah, that sounds very kind of um, so like a great focus for kind of your overall mission on what you're trying to achieve, not just with the technology, but in the conversations that you have with customers who are trying to understand the value you provide, which I guess kind of leads me sort of to my next question, which is how to truly capture timely, relevant, accurate data from the source pertaining to these use cases we're talking about. How does that conversation usually go with customers when you are talking to them about the value this provides? Because the simplicity aspect of it that you've mentioned a number of times here is very, very important for any element or any part or any use case in IoT. But have you noticed in the industries that you focus on any type of disconnect between the value you're all providing and just their general understanding or perception of the value, that kind of educational component?
Yeah. It's a great question. And what it always leads me back to in like my 5 years at Vutility, 5 years ago. So if you think about the energy industry and utilities and how non-progressive they typically are, they're slow, they use old technology. There's not a big incentive to change. In the beginning, we would bring our tech and basically we weren't selling against many competitors, but we were selling against doing nothing, right?
Mhm.
And that's sometimes a really hard sell. As we've started to show, at the way I like to look at it is the cost per data point. What it used to be is extremely high, and it wasn't backhauled to the cloud. It wasn't accessible. It didn't flow, right? As we're bending the cost curve down as a cost per data point, people are starting to understand these are the use cases of stuff I can do with this data that in the
Mhm.
past it was just way too expensive on a cost per data point or cost per measured point, right? And so I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the we're in the middle of I feel like a revolution in people understanding if I measure and monitor this, I
Mhm.
can get this insight, which leads me to this action, right?
Sure.
And so that's our role is to give you those salient data points to then make the action. We haven't jumped ahead into, hey, you should do this. This is we
Right.
partner with companies to do that. The way I like to describe what we do, because one of our investors is Chevron, one of our main
Okay.
investors, is we're kind of like the oil pump, the oil rig that's pumping the oil out of the ground, and we're the pipeline, but we're not the refinery at the end. So
Gotcha.
we're harvesting that data and we're piping it out at scale to all different people that are then analyzing and using it for whatever their use case might
Okay.
be. Machine monitoring, ESG reporting, benchmarking, billing, right? So there's just so many things you can do with the data.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think it's like obviously the first and most important step of when it comes to you're thinking about IoT is just being able to get access to data that was not available before, and then the
Yeah,
next step is being able to take it, interpret it, or present it in a way that can be interpreted and analyzed, and then utilized by the end user to make decisions or whatever they're trying to do with the data,
yep,
in order to be successful with any type of deployment when it comes to IoT. Let me ask you, when you were the product you showed earlier, when you were building that product, kind of what was the process like to build it? I'm sure there were many different pieces
yeah,
that went into the development of it. If there was patents involved, that's a whole nother kind of thing. But just like, and I guess what I'm trying to lead into is to talk about not just the process you went through, but from a customer's perspective, that whole buy versus build side of things, or I guess question that they a lot of times are asking themselves, like, is it better to just buy something that already exists versus build maybe something
right.
custom? Well, how did that kind of conversation happen internally, and then how have you kind of see that perceived out in the market?
Yeah. So anybody who does an IoT startup and tells you they had it all planned out, they're lying to you, right? There's a lot of little twists and turns and bumps and things you learn along the way.
Mhm.
One of the things that I think is super unique about Utility when we're talking about our process of innovation is when I look at the IoT landscape for startups, you see a lot of people they'll they'll build a visualization or analytics solution, right? They'll build their cloud, and then they have their sensor that they want to integrate, whether they buy it or build it. And understanding of how to scale a sensor to the scale that we want to play at, that's a completely different animal than building a software solution.
Mm.
And so we started a little bit reverse. We knew that first of all, we looked for a solution in the market that we could buy, right? They
Right.
gave us the speed to install, the granularity, and the low cost, right? There's nothing out there. So that gave us an opportunity to first of all innovate, file patents, and then build at scale. So we focused on finding a scaled manufacturer, and that's one of the first things that we perfected is can we build this at scale? So right now our throughput's 100,000 units a month that we can
Mm.
build. Our partner is one of the largest contract manufacturers in the world. I'm not going to say who they are, but it's, we have scale. So we figured out
Yeah.
hardware. And I was the chief operating officer while we were doing this. And our CTO comes from that world, and it's a different animal to have quality at scale, dealing with supply chains. It almost makes building a software solution seem like child's play relative to all the moving parts and yields and tolerances and unique materials that you need for the product. So I always tell people an IoT business is almost like running two businesses, right?
Sure.
You have your procurement and manufacturing side, and then you have your product delivery and software side of the business. So
Definitely.
yeah.
So I wanted to kind of pivot real quick, kind of as we're getting closer to wrapping up, and ask you about other challenges that you've seen in the space in general. You mentioned scalability here a second ago, so I'm curious if you've noticed any unique challenges as it relates to companies being able to scale, and then just generally speaking, outside of that, anything that kind of comes to mind.
Yeah. It's funny because we love working with very large corporates. One of the things I've realized working with these companies is it might sound a little sacrilegious, but you look at let's just say a company that has 5,000 locations,
Hmm.
and you start to talk to about their IoT strategy or their team that manages their critical assets, and they have no idea what's going on behind the meter in those buildings. And it's shocking to me. So one of the things that I realize is there's a massive opportunity. Most of these organizations are flying blind when it comes to understanding their critical infrastructure, which is a massive opportunity for us, right? But one of the things that you'll always run into is the internal teams and where the data goes. So having the data go to your cloud rather than stay on-prem, that's the thing that you're always going to run into, right? Is custody of the data. And any device that, if you think about it, has any complexity, the data has to go somewhere to be analyzed, parsed, decrypted, right? And so that's been one of the not hiccups, but challenges, is dealing with internal data management policies with large companies, and
Okay.
really trying to get them to understand, like, almost every system you use internally, the data is not staying on-prem, right?
Right.
It's being backhauled to someone's cloud somewhere. This is no different.
Right.
So that's been something that was unanticipated,
Okay.
that we dealt with. And then the other part is I just think when you have a product that has data that can be used by so many different applications, trying to understand and visualize that data for everybody how they want it is very difficult, right?
Mhm.
Which is why our strategy to be an analytics company, we are not that, right?
Right.
It's funny, we talked about this, but we have a customer that um, that said, after we presented to them, they said, "Wow, you're not a Yakko," and we're like,
Okay.
"What's a Yakko?" And they said, "Yet another analytics company."
Okay.
Because the hardest part is to get the data at the source at scale, and
Right.
then broadcast it up through to the cloud, and then deliver it to an analytics partner. So
Mm.
we've stayed away from the analytics piece, and we've chosen to partner with those guys, and it's been a good partnership thus far, is to be the pipeline of the data for those kind of companies.
Now, let me ask, when it comes to just the business model standpoint, are more customers in the pipeline coming from your side or from your partners that are then coming to you and saying, "Hey, we need the data ingestion and collection piece." That's why they come to you, or is it you are finding the customers, then you're saying, "Okay, now once we we can pull the data, and now we go work with our partners to and bring the partners in for the analytics piece of it all."
That's a great question. We used to go direct. About a year ago, we pivoted to go to partners, and it's been more partners with projects that they've won that they need the data for, and they've used. I love the term simulated data, and
Mhm.
that means like old, stale, estimated, right? And when they see our solution, a light goes off, and they realize that their solution becomes more valuable when it's plugged into the utility data pipe, right?
Okay.
So although we do get leads from people, we usually send those leads directly to a partner to actually use the end data solution, right?
Gotcha.
So Yeah, it's varied, but more often than not, it's partners with existing scaled projects, and
Mm,
they know they need the data. They just have until they found us, they haven't had a great way to find that data and deliver it into their.
true.
So
Yeah, it's definitely a multi kind of there's multiple pieces to this all, and finding a company who can do both, whether it's through partnerships or on their own, is a challenge for sure. And it sounds like you all have some very exciting things going on in the space that you play in, which is just great to hear.
yep, yeah, we're super bullish on the growth of the industry. I mean,
Great.
just from our perspective, the obviously we're just going to grab a tiny piece of that, but the industrial IoT market by 2030 is going to be $1 trillion market, right? And
Hmm.
it's just rapidly growing, and the mandates on energy data are accelerating as well. So we see executives, 5-year plans that executive teams have for energy reporting and ESG reporting are being
Right.
compressed down to 1-year plans, and
Wow.
they're all looking for solutions because they realize there's no fidelity to their data unless they can get it from the source, right?
Okay. Sure.
They need to be believable. The data needs to be
Absolutely.
so.
Totally agree with you. I think it's a common, not necessarily problem, but it's a similar need across many industries.
Mhm.
That data, the access to the data, how believable is the data, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So it really resonates well, I think, just with what IoT is and what it's the goal of the industry in general, with all the different technologies and components of it. So last thing I want to ask you is for our audience out there who wants to learn more, get a better sense of kind of what you all are doing, stay in touch, maybe follow up with questions. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, go check us out at vutility.com. So it's utility with a V in front of it, and we have a blog, and obviously we have a social media presence, and uh,
Fantastic.
yeah, we'll look for us on your podcast, right? Hopefully, I get to come back again and talk about our
Absolutely.
product that comes out in a couple months, right?
Definitely, there's lots of new stuff that we're doing. We'd love to find a way to work together, so we can chat more about that offline for sure. But I really appreciate your time, Matt. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for kind of shedding light on an industry and a space that we haven't had too many experts come in here and talk about. So it was a great conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Cool, my pleasure, man. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for watching that episode of the IoT For All podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit the bell notification so you get the latest episodes as soon as they become available. Other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.